Hi guys, welcome back to MassiveSynth.com tutorials. This is part 3 in the Psy Trance feature we've been doing this month, and in this tutorial I was going to show you how to make a Psy Trance sequence sound using Massive, and just holding down one note here is the sound we've got. So we've got a lot of programming going on with the performers, our own arpeggiator and just various other LFOs, just creating that sequence type sound. So let's start off by creating a new sound in Massive. Go straight to Oscillator 1, and this is going to be a multiplex waveform, and we're going to turn this into a bend plus and bring the wavetable position right round so it's pointing just before the W. You've got quite a nice tone there. Bring this intensity down a little bit as well, just before halfway, and just take the pitch up to 0.06 because we're just going to detune these oscillators slightly to help thicken the sound. So move over to Oscillator 2 next, turn that on. It's going to be a Scrapyard waveform, and it's actually combining quite nicely with this multiplex, giving us quite a nice tone. So pull this wavetable position round to the left, so about a quarter of the way up. Keep the intensity on full. Amp can stay on full for now, and we're actually going to take the pitch of this oscillator down by 1 octave. And detune it by 0.6 again. And turn on Oscillator 3 next. This can stay as a square saw, but pull the wavetable position all the way to the left so it's a square wave. And pull the intensity down a little bit, so just taking some of the top end of that oscillator off, and bring this amp down a bit as well. It's about a quarter of the way up, and now we're going to modulate the amps of these 3 oscillators shortly. So we'll also take the pitch of this oscillator to 0.04. So next, move over to the filter section. We're going to use 2 filters for this sound. So first up in filter 1, going to have a bandpass filter, and keep the cutoff about a third of the way up. We're going to modulate this cutoff frequency with an envelope shortly. Pull the bandwidth down a little bit, and the resonance, we can pull that down a bit too. So what we want to do is get that sweep going on, which is quite nice. And let's pull this mix slider down to filter 2 and pull the volume of filter 2 up. This is going to be a comb filter. Keep the, pull the pitch to just before halfway, pull the damping down slightly, and feedback can stay around halfway. And what we want to do with this is just modulating that pitch gives us quite a nice tone on the sound. So pull the mix slider of these 2 filters, so it's kind of halfway in between fully to mix 1 and halfway, so round about there. Should be alright. So next we can move over to the amp envelope. Just pull the attack all the way to the left. Move over to the oscillator section next. Want to check the restart via gate box, so re-triggering all the oscillator phases, and pull the glide time down to about a quarter of the way. Just going to have a little bit of glide on this sound. Move over to the voicing section next, make it monophonic so we can hear that glide. So let's go ahead and start setting up our first modulation here. In the first LFO slot, we're going to turn this into a performer. Actually going to modulate the amplitude of all 3 oscillators. So holding down shift, click and drag the crosshair, and drop it in that amp modulation slot here. And for oscillator 1, just pull the amp down to all the way to the left, and then just click and drag up so the modulation amount is about 2/3 of the way round. Oscillator 2, pull the amp down to 0 and click and drag up so the modulation amount goes all the way around, so it's on full. And for oscillator 3, we want just a little bit of amp modulation there, so just so it's maybe kind of hitting about the A on the amp. So So now this performer is modulating the amplitude of these 3 oscillators. Let's go ahead and set up some patterns in this performer. So first up with this performer, we want to sync it. Keep the ratio as 1/16. And I'm going to program 2 patterns in here, one in the top, one in the bottom, and have a mix between the two, which will sound quite nice and give us quite a nice complex sequence type sound. So pull the X-phase sequence all the way to the top for now, check the low curve box, and let's start programming a bit of a pattern in here. Something like that, sounding quite nice. Okay, so let's move the X-phase sequence down to the bottom now and program in our second pattern. And now let's get a blend between these 2 patterns we've got going on. So something like that is sounding quite nice, quite complex, quite sequence type sound. Next up, let's set up an arpeggiator on this sound. So this second LFO slot here, let's make this a stepper, sync this and keep the ratio as 1/16. And then let's hold down shift and click and drag the crosshair, modulate the pitch of these 3 oscillators using this stepper. And let's take the modulation amount up to +12. And on this stepper here, if we activate the snap to grid box here, and on step 12 go +3 semitones, step 14 +7, step 16 +12. We've got a little bit of an arpeggiator going on the end of that riff, but what I want to do is have a little bit of a glide on those notes, so we've got a bit more of a transition between the sort of arpeggiated steps here. So activate these boxes here, and this glide mod, we can dial in the amount of glide that we're going to apply to these. So it's got a little bit of glide on those notes now, which is sounding pretty cool. Next thing I want to do is set up another LFO or stepper even, and add even more movement into this sound. So I'm going to use this stepper here, click and drag the crosshair. I'm going to modulate a few different things with this stepper here. I'm going to modulate the wavetable position of oscillator 3, the intensity of oscillator 3, the amp of oscillator 3, and the pitch of the comb filter, and just dial in different kind of amounts of modulation here. So a little bit of modulation on the pitch, bit of modulation on the amp of oscillator 3, the intensity, and the wavetable position. This is just going to give us quite a nice amount of movement with the sound here. And with snap to grid activated, sync this stepper, keep it 1/16, maybe pull the amp down slightly and start drawing in some different values in here. if we turn the amp of this stepper down now, you can hear the effect that that stepper is having on the sound, just creating a bit more movement, giving it a bit more of a sequenced element. Okay, so next up we could start modulating the cutoff frequency of this bandpass filter using an envelope. So click and drag the crosshair, this first envelope, over to the cutoff frequency, click and drag up so the modulation amount is on full now. And let's set up this envelope amount so we've got a sharp attack and then a quite smooth kind of decay. So for this smooth decay, check this linear box. So I've got more of a diagonal kind of lined decay really. So push the decay amount up a little bit and pull the sustain down. Something like that. Check the trigger 0 reset box, so we've got a nice re-triggering envelope each time we hit a new key. I'm getting that nice bandpass sweep on the sound now. Next up we could dial in some effects here. So in the effects 1 slot, I'm going to have a chorus. Keep everything the same apart from the dry wet, just bring this down slightly. It's giving us quite a nice sort of character to the sound. Next up I'm going to have a sync delay. Pull the dry wet down to around 1/4 of the way up, push the damp to 3/4 of the way up. Feedback can stay on halfway. Left channel 1/8, right channel 1/4, and by having these left and right channels different, we're going to get this ping pong style delay. Okay, so one of the next things we could set up is the insert down here, this insert effect, and have a sine shaper. This is going to really beef the sound up. Keep the dry wet and the drive halfway. And just check the routing here. I want to put this insert after both the filters really, so it has more of an effect on the sound by checking the routing there and putting that insert in this part of the signal path. And one of the final things to do with the sound now is go over to the EQ section, turn it on, and I actually wanted to modulate this high frequency or high shelf here. Notice moving that around we get quite a nice sweep on the sound, so it kind of further enhances this bandpass sweep here. It just gives us another kind of texture or layer to the sound now. So I'm going to use an LFO to control this high shelf here. So click and drag the crosshair of this LFO over to the high shelf modulation box, click and drag up so the modulation amount is on full. Now it's actually going to change this LFO into a performer and sync this performer, take the ratio down to 1/8 and load in a slightly different curve for this performer. So one of these sort of plucky curves in here, take the steps down to 1 and move the X-fade sequence all the way to the top so it's only this top curve what's affecting the sound, and now we'll get a getting this high shelf kind of sweep, which kind of adds to this cutoff or this bandpass sweep that we've got going on here, and just gives us another texture, another layer to the sound, and just helps with that kind of sequenced element. So that's the sound come together there, a sort of Psy Trance sequence in massive. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. I hope you found it useful. Any questions, then please get in touch. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon. Cheers. Bye.